Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton show. Today, another exciting show and definitely another exciting guest. Just let me tell you where we're going with today's episode. Imagine, if you will, with me, traveling all over the world. And I do mean all over the world. This young lady, all the way from Cincinnati, Ohio, you wouldn't even know that she's from Cincinnati, Ohio. Wouldn't even know that she was born across the bridge in Newport, Kentucky area by following her on her social media page. She's all over the place. Every time you look at her, she's on some ship and she's waving and she's giving information. And I just had to have her on the show because I'm like, how do you get to do this? Like, I'm in the wrong occupation. Like, I want to be doing what she's doing. I want to know how that beast mindset has gotten her from going out of trauma, you name it, into doing what I consider a beautiful life. She's doing what she wants to do, which is traveling and having fun. Without further ado, let's welcome to the show, Miss Melissa Newman. Melissa, what's up, baby girl?
Hi, thanks for having me on, Andre. I'm excited to share my passion for travel.
Passion for travel, and I guarantee that's what it is. Before we get started, you were born in Newport, Kentucky, which is actually the bridge heading back over to Ohio, Cincinnati. Tell me a little bit about who you are first before we get started.
Yeah, so I always just tell people I'm from Cincinnati because I'm a professor at the University of Cincinnati. I spend a lot of time in Cincinnati, and people that aren't from the Midwest, they get so confused about the relationship between Kentucky and Ohio. They
Right.
think Kentucky is deep south, they don't think of it as Midwest. And the area where I grew up, we literally would just walk across the bridge and we would be in
Mhm.
Ohio.
They call that the tri-state. Indiana,
Yes.
Kentucky, Kentucky, Ohio. Yeah,
Yep.
I've been over there. What was it like growing up for you in Kentucky? We hear a lot of misconceptions about what you, like you said, some people think Kentucky is south, but it's really not south. Then we hear a lot about Cincinnati, which Cincinnati has had a lot of microscope news, from racial tension to riots, you name it, it's come out of Cincinnati. But people that don't understand their region, like you said, that Newport Bridge, it's literally right there. Before you know it, you know, if you committed a crime over in Cincinnati, you could just jump across that bridge and be in Kentucky with a snap of a finger. What was it like for you growing up?
Yeah, it's a really interesting place to live. I love my hometown. I'm very proud of my hometown. It is considered a lower socioeconomic status. So when I went off to college, deep in central Kentucky at the University of Kentucky is where I got my bachelor's degree. There was some derision of, oh, you're from Newport. Ew. I actually had a girl once tell me that. Ew. Newport is just an urban core. It's right by Cincinnati. But Kentucky can be a very southern seeming state. And so Kentucky is a beautiful, interesting place. Depending on where you are regionally, you're going to get a vastly different experience. And I'm happy I grew up where I did and I still live in this region because we have all of the benefits of the beauty of the bluegrass and the horses and the horse farms and the bourbon trail. But I thrive on being in an urban center and I want to be close to professional sports like the Bengals and the Reds, for better or for worse, and theater and opera. And so I think this is really a great place to live.
You grew up in a household that included alcoholism and a mom who didn't complete high school and stuff. It wasn't an easy transition for you, was it?
It was not. Growing up, I again had a father who struggled with alcoholism. He was abusive. My mom got pregnant in high school, dropped out, later went and got her GED. Very proud of her for that. And my parents, they tried their best, I think, a lot of times. But when you're a teenager and then they had me after my sister 2 years later, and then I had cancer, So when you're that young and you're dealing with 2 children, one of whom has cancer, and you're growing up in a low socioeconomic environment, you have a family history of not completing high school, a family history of a lot of incarceration. It's hard to beat those systemic issues and barriers. And so, it did present a lot of challenges, but I'm sounds crazy, but I'm thankful for those challenges because that created that beast mindset and that made me make promises to myself as a kid that the chaos and the struggle that I was going through then, I promised myself that I would build a life for myself, that I would never have to live that struggle again. And it's been hard and I've had to hustle nonstop. I've had 2 jobs most of my adult life, all of my adult life. I got my first job at 15 and I've worked nonstop. And I'm all about the hustle and the grind. And my success is due in large part to the way I was raised.
You said it. You said a word that should impact everyone, but it impacted you at a young age. You mentioned cancer. Tell me a little bit about that and what that journey was like, and how did you get diagnosed, and what type of cancer was it?
So it's a kidney cancer called Wilms tumor, pediatric cancer, and I was 18 months old. So the good news is I have little to no memory of the actual cancer. They took out a kidney, so I have one kidney. I have a scar. They got you like a fish back in the 80s when you have a kidney removed. They didn't have laparoscopic surgery back then. But I do remember growing up having to go to Cincinnati Children's Hospital, which I am thankful you asked about the diagnosis. I actually was misdiagnosed. I was very sick, again, a little baby. My parents, for all of their issues, had the wherewithal, to take me to the emergency room. The emergency room said, "Oh, she just has the flu. Take her home. She's going to be fine." They knew something was really wrong. So they took me across the river. Thankfully, we have a top 5 pediatric hospital in Cincinnati. I owe them my life literally, but Cincinnati Children's Hospital, they diagnosed the cancer, immediately got me into radiation, chemotherapy, removed the kidney, removed the tumor. And I think growing up, that's just been always a reminder of the fragility of life, of, how easily that could have been missed. And if my parents just took that advice and went home, I probably wouldn't be here today. And that I think also has contributed to my mindset when it comes to how I approach life and how hard I work.
You, I'm glad that everything worked out. And let me say this too. Even though your father was an alcoholic and your mom managed to complete school, they still knew what it was like to raise a family. They took the initiative, even at that tender age that you were, to keep pushing to make sure that you was all right. Because in some situations, when you have parents that are suffering from some form of addiction, the addiction outweighs the family to some degree. That wasn't the situation with you. How does it make you feel knowing that even though your father might have had an addiction, he still, and your mom, they still managed to make sure that they kept their eyes on making sure you was healthy?
It makes me want to, I mean, gratitude, first of all, and just being thankful that they did pursue additional treatment, a second opinion, and obviously took me to appointments and things. There were a lot of them. And I think that's why I do tend to give them a lot of grace. I know a lot of folks in similar family situations that, have made the choice, and that is absolutely their choice to cut off their parents because of this, that, or the other. Um, my parents were far from perfect. I know a lot of times they did their best. My father unfortunately did pass away several years ago, but we had a good relationship when he passed away because he eventually, thankfully, did get sober toward my senior year of high school. The abuse did stop actually. I was about 12. My sister and I fought back physically, and he realized, okay, they're going to fight back. And so that was the end of the physical abuse. And later, as he got sober, he made amends, he made apologies. He really did try his hardest to make up for the damage that he had done. And I was willing to forgive him. And I'm thankful for that because when he passed away unexpectedly, I didn't live with regret. I didn't live with regret of, oh, I haven't talked to my dad. And I'm not begrudging anyone who chooses to cut out toxicity in their lives. That's their choice. But for
Mm.
me, I felt it very freeing to give grace, to give forgiveness. And I'm still, have good relationship with my mom. We're not the closest in the world, but I know that she tried the best that she could with the resources and limited tools that she did have.
You mentioned abuse with you and your other siblings. elaborate on the abuse that you guys were going through. You said it stopped around your senior year. What do you think led up to the abuse? And more importantly, how long did you live in the code of silence with that, you and your sibling? And more importantly, where was your mom at during all this? Because this seemed to have gone on for quite a bit of time.
It did. So the abuse stopped around age 12. That was when I remember this pinnacle moment of my dad. He would use a belt and he would, whip us. And I know some old school people, they wouldn't call that abuse. They would say, well, that's whipping. But when you're using a belt and you're leaving physical marks where people can't sit, that absolutely is no question in my mind abuse. And I would never laid a hand in any way on my own children in large part because of my own experience. And then he got sober around when I was 17, 18, so senior year of high school. But yes, pretty much everybody knew about it. I had, teachers at school sometimes that would even acknowledge it. And it is disappointing that, to my knowledge, nobody ever intervened, whether or not someone had a conversation with him about, you need to stop this. I certainly hope those conversations happened. I was not privy to them, but that did create resentment toward my mother of, they divorced when I was younger. The abuse continued. Of not intervening, of leaving us in that situation. And then it becomes a point of, who do you blame, the abuser or the person that leaves you with the abuser? And I think there's some blame to be shared, but I think there's also forgiveness there. And like I said, I fully released that. I've let that go. I've dealt with the trauma from that. And interestingly enough, my dad was abusive when he was sober. I actually preferred him being drunk as a child because he was a lot nicer. And I think what manifested was anger. And I think he had anger issues, and when he was sober, he just wanted to drink and he wanted to escape life. So I wanted him drunk because he was much more pleasant to be around and he was much less likely to be abusive. But I've had to really do a lot of self reflection of how that manifests with me. To this day, I've never really been drunk. I don't drink. I will occasionally drink, but my childhood trauma and alcoholism running through my family definitely informs part of that. But for me, I realized I had my own anger issues and I've had to spend my entire adult life dealing with those, because it wasn't just the abuse, but also growing up in the high school I did, it was kind of kill or be killed. So I got into a lot of altercations. I got into physical fights in high school and I saw it as a defense mechanism, but that carried over into adult life. And I had to make a choice and say, I don't want to live life as an angry person. I don't want to be my father. I think that's why he dropped out of a heart attack at 51. And it's scary because I'm not that far off from that age now. And I don't want to have that life. I don't want to be that person. And I have built a life with intention to not be that way.
Wow. You mentioned you didn't want to be that way. You mentioned you wanted to break the stigma that's attached to not completing high school, not going to college, being trapped like a hamster in a cage, going to school, having to fight for for the killed or be killed. What was when you mentioned your father, and this isn't a show about your father, this is to let the people know what you had to go through with an addiction and to break that particular narrative. How close were you to his parents? Because you mentioned this is something that's been going on and on and on and on. So was this something that you witnessed even going to outside family members locations and functions?
So, my saving grace of my childhood were my grandparents. I was blessed to have an amazing grandmother on my mother's side, but unfortunately, she passed away when I was younger. And then I had amazing grandparents on my dad's side. Um, Amazing to the extent that they could be. My grandfather also struggled with alcoholism. Pretty much every man in my family almost universally has struggled with alcoholism. But my grandmother is a blessing. She's still here, thankfully. I consider her one of my absolute best friends. We are extremely close. And I have never questioned her of, did you try to intervene in terms of breaking that abuse? I am absolutely certain she had conversations with him, but I do know that she was always my support net. And I know I wouldn't be here today without that, because when my dad was having a really bad episode, at one point he burned our childhood house down. He literally burned it down.
Wow.
She was always there. And I would spend large periods of time with her. And then things were so bad at certain points where I actually went and lived with her for several years. And that was the only moment in my life that I kind of knew some degree of peace. It wasn't completely peaceful because my grandfather also had his issues, but it was the most peaceful time that I knew. But it was interesting because they live in a rural part of Kentucky, and I grew up in the urban core. And so to have that culture shock of growing up in an urban environment and now to be on a literal farm where you don't walk down the street to the corner market, you can't just, walk to your friend's house. It was very isolating and very shocking, um, and created kind of this dichotomy of country versus city. And so I craved that urban core. I missed that. And so I lived with them for a few years. My dad got his act somewhat together. He would get sober, fall off the wagon. He followed that cycle for a long time until finally it did stick. Like I said, toward my senior year of high school. But yeah, I'm very grateful for my grandparents and especially my grandmother because she was really that one stable part of my life. And then my older sister, she was 2 years older than me. She went through the same thing. She chose not to live with our grandparents, so we were separated there for a while. But we always had each other as a built-in support system. And I'm very thankful for that.
I just got to ask this question. How in the heck did you did say your dad burnt down the house?
Yeah, he told us he was gonna do it. I don't know if it was an insurance pull. He got away with it. I mean, he's passed away, so I talk about it openly. We had a couple of incidences that were big news. He was running illegal fireworks, and there was a big explosion in my hometown. Such a big thing. It was a federal case. That's why he became a felon. And now, even 30 plus years after the fact, when that anniversary hits, everyone in my hometown is, do you remember where you were the day the city blew up? I'm like, yeah, it was my dad. I mean, I don't run around telling people that, but I'm also not ashamed of it either because that's not me. That's something he did. He learned from it. He paid his penance. He went to prison. He did his time. And it is what it is, right? And so I also live my life authentically in a way that I don't carry shame. I'm certainly not going to carry the burden of other people's shame either. But at one juncture, yes, he said the night before, I'm going to burn the house down, take any valuables you want, sending you off to grandparents' house. He sent me off, 4 o'clock in the morning, we got a call, your house burned down. So yes, he did it and he got away with it. So
You know that sounds crazy, right? That
I
sounds
know it's funny. My older sister and I were like, we so casually talk about it because you normalize it, right? When you grow up this way,
yeah,
and you also have come to terms with it as an adult. I'm not traumatized by it anymore. I'm sure I still carry some after effects of these things, right? You can't have this kind of
right.
crazy upbringing and not be impacted by it. But that's why you do a lot of journaling and meditation and therapy and self reflection. But we talk about it casually, and I can talk about it without feeling emotional. It is what it is. It's part of my past. It happened. I can't change it. And I just
Right.
try to look at it in terms of the positive of how it shaped me into who I am today.
You talk about your sister who's 2 years older than you. Like now that you look back on your life and what you guys share, good, bad, and ugly, what do you guys really reflect on most? Because it's kind of like you're feeling each other's emotions. So it's been so many years that have passed. Sorry about the loss of your father. I'm glad that he was able to find peace and recover. And I hope whatever situation with your mom, you guys can keep stacking the bricks to make that relationship even better. But with that said, what are some of the things that you and your sister talk about that you feel has helped both of you guys get to where you're at today?
Um, I'll actually preface this with saying too, I'm very proud of my sister. And then we also have a younger sister. And it's a really interesting dynamic because she was born 9 years after me. So there's a big age gap. And her childhood experience had its own challenges, but it was vastly different than the experience that my older sister and I had. Because by the time our little sister was old enough to have any memories, she never was hit. Thankfully, I'm very thankful for that. So she missed all the abuse era. My dad was mostly sober, mostly had his stuff together by the time she has those kind of core memories. He still had his issues. He still had anger problems, but the alcoholism wasn't as big a prevalent of an issue as it was for my older sister and I. So it's interesting that you have three siblings who have the same biological parents who have such wildly different childhood experiences. But my older
Mm.
sister, she has 3 degrees, including a doctorate. I have 4 degrees, including a doctorate. My younger sister has 2 degrees, including an MBA. So between the three of us growing up the way that we did, we have 9 college degrees and we're all very successful. We just spend time kind of, I wouldn't say nonchalantly talking about it, but so much time has passed and we've done so much self work that we're able to talk about it, usually without getting emotional. So this might sound crazy, but when we talk about our dad, it's mostly out of sadness because we miss him. Because we were all able to forgive. We all really were shattered when he passed away. And it's just more about positive memories and the good things about childhood. And then we'll talk about the crazy stuff too. Like, do you remember the time when our little sister was an infant and we were strolling her through the streets of Newport and getting on a tank, which is our city bus, and going on a 45-minute journey to the mall?
Yeah.
Or, my sister shoplifted deodorant because we didn't have any and she got caught, and had to go to child juvie court. So it's more of like taking the bad memories and almost kind of joking about it. And that's probably a trauma response. I don't know that that's the most healthy way to unpack a traumatic childhood, but it's
Right.
how we've been able to cope.
What do you think it's going to take to keep stacking the bridges with your mom? And why do you think that is actually somewhat of a struggle? Because if you can feel this way about your father who's now gone, that might mean I'm not a therapist. You got the 5 degrees and your sister with the other degrees. I'm just saying in general, with so much college education among you three, what is holding back from just understanding or trying to get a better clarity of your mom and the relationship that you have with your mom? And then the second part of that question is, do your other siblings have the same feelings that you're having with your mom as well?
I would say that, yeah, all three of us have a very complicated relationship with our mom, and it's complicated in different ways. And I don't want to necessarily speak for them, but I
Right.
would say of the three of us, I probably have the most ongoing relationship with our mother. And I think the difference, because sometimes I do ask myself, of how were you able to be more forgiving toward your father when he was the
Right.
perpetrator of the abuse and he was the alcoholic versus your mother? And I think the difference is accountability. Before my dad passed, he was accountable. He didn't make excuses. It was, I was this, I did this, and I'm sorry. And I know I can't make up for it, but I knew I could always depend on my dad. And he didn't have a lot of resources, he didn't have money, but I knew that he would lay down and give his life for me if that's what it ever took. I don't know if I could say the same for my mom. I think my mom has a little bit of a revisionist history, and that's probably her own trauma response. So I try to give her grace with that.
Mhm.
But I do think there is, in her mindset, a perspective of I was a really good mom. I did these things and she did some great things. She always made holidays really special. And I'm thankful for that. And I appreciate her for that. But I think if there was a little more accountability on the end of here's where maybe I dropped the ball as a parent, and here's maybe where I failed you as my child, and here's where I've committed to doing self work and doing better, um, I think there would be a better relationship. But I can't control that. And so I've learned to let go of the things that I can't control because otherwise I'll end up a very stressed out, angry person and I'll end up just like my father.
You wind up going to college. How long did it take you to address the internal mechanisms that you were dealing with so it wouldn't affect your dreams and your ambition? Second part of this question is, what made you decide to get into the area of expertise that you got into as well?
It's taken me a long time and I don't think I'll ever feel like I'm fully developed as a human being. Every day I wake up and try to be a better version of myself than I was yesterday. Every day I deal with this internal anger and the internal control issues that I have, and they still manifest, right? And still I disappoint myself. I might lash out at a certain situation and really have to self-reflect later of like, did you really maneuver the right way in that situation? be accountable. No, you didn't. But how do we do better in maneuvering in the future? My experience, my entree into college was very challenging. I actually went off to University of Kentucky, felt like I was hot stuff because high school had always been easy to me. I went to one of the lowest performing high schools in the state, but I'm very proud of it. It's a great community. It's a very special community. And it has its upsides, but it's not the best college preparatory environment. So I went off to college, flunked out miserably. I was working full time, going to school full time. All I was doing was working, going to school. I had zero guidance. I had no one to come with me to orientation. I was the only person that didn't have a parent or family member with me. I was the only person that moved myself in by myself. I had no one to turn to with advice, questions, things like that. So just transitioning into college life and realizing, oh my God, I am ill equipped for this. And then having to come back home the second semester of my freshman year because I failed out and come back with my tail between my legs of, oh, I thought I was so smart and high school was so easy for me. And I never had to really work hard or study in terms of school. And now I do. So that was a rude awakening. And then on top of that, layered on top of that, I had to deal with my own interpersonal issues of my control problems, my anger issues. And I did come back, right? I'm like, I'm not going to be my parents. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to finish college. So I worked hard that spring, stacked my coins, made my cash, went back, and then I just put my nose to the grindstone, learned from my mistakes, and I ended up graduating. My last 3 semesters almost were a 4.0, but still I had a hard time overcoming a first semester of straight Fs, basically. So I graduated with like a 3.3 GPA or something like that. But then I got my MBA with a 4.0. I got my Master of Arts with a 4.0, and I got my PhD with a 3.98. I had one A minus. So I'm a person that learns from her mistakes. But in terms of the anger stuff, in terms
Yeah.
of the misplaced or displaced anger, that's a problem. Sometimes I see myself doing and I'm like, oh, that's like your dad. Don't do that. Don't be that person. That's constant work. And I think I'll be working on myself to the day I die.
Congratulations. Such a wow. That's that beast mindset all the way thick and thin through you. That's crazy. You mentioned you went in by yourself, you did everything by yourself, but where's your sister at? You got a sister that's 2 years older than you. Did she help you
Yes.
prepare for college? Was she already in college? Or did you guys not connect? Because I do remember you saying you guys had separated for a little bit.
Yeah, so she went to Northern Kentucky University, which is kind of near our hometown. I wanted to be away from home, so I went a whole hour and a half south, which is not very far. But I needed to be in state for tuition purposes because I was 100% financially on my own in every regard. So she did have a 2-year head start, but she was so immersed in trying to transition into college, and she also had a bumpy start, and it ended up taking her a really long time to finish her bachelor's degree. And then I was so immersed because that's when I was living partially between my grandparents' house and then driving at some point. At one point, I lived at the farm and drove to the city. So I was driving my senior year 45 minutes each way. And I was playing 3 sports, working. We just didn't have time. So we did kind of, I guess, have a little distance there just because we were both scrambling to survive.
Yeah.
But I guess she gave me some insight into college, but she was dealing with her own struggles of transitioning into college. So I don't know how much guidance she had to give me, I guess.
You said sports. What sports did you play?
I played volleyball, track, and tennis.
Ah, you regular all around athlete, huh? Did you
I was
do that
very
in high school
mediocre.
too?
I was a mediocre athlete, let's just say that.
Now, were you doing these sports in high school as well?
These were high school sports. I didn't do them in college. No way was I going to be a Division 1 athlete.
Okay, I
No way. No, I did
misunderstood.
them in high
I thought you
school.
said you did it in college. I was like, wow, that's pretty good. Okay, before we wrap up, let's talk about something that you're doing all over social media. That's really is one of the reasons it got my attention. Because like, how are you doing this? How are you a college professor in Cincinnati and going to all of these beautiful places? Talking about come and go with me. You haven't even sent me an invite to come. I'm like, hey, how can I go? You're all over the place. How did this happen for you?
Great. Well, this is your official invite. Come on a cruise. It's a great way to travel. So I've always loved to travel. And like I mentioned, this hustle mindset has been ingrained in me throughout life. And my whole life, I've had 2 jobs. Either gone to school full time and work full time. And then when I finished all of my college, it was 2 jobs. So for a really long time, I was a full time executive director running a nonprofit. So for about 10 years I did this. And then I was a full-time college professor. Now, thankfully, when you're a professor, it's very flexible. So as long as you come in, you teach your classes. And now, in my case, I teach all exclusively online. I have for the last year and a half or so. So you were afforded that flexibility. And as long as you can perform well with both, they're happy to have you. So
Right.
I did this full-time hustle. Um, Ended up getting a divorce, which was I was married to my high school sweetheart. So we met in high school. We were 15, the only boyfriend I ever had. He played 3 sports, football, all that. Went to the army, then came and joined me at UK. We were together 22 years, but then unexpectedly got a divorce because his childhood trauma, which is crazy as my childhood was, we look like the Cleaver family next to his. He really went through some stuff.
Right.
So he made a lot of mistakes that led to the dissolution of our marriage. But I have forgiveness for him too, because his childhood trauma is nuclear next level childhood trauma. I'll just say that. And it
Okay.
caught up to him. He tried to escape it, graduated college, got a master's degree, did his service in the army, but it caught up to him. And that was just another cautionary tale for me of like, even though you get to your 30s, you think you've escaped this, you think that you have done the right things, you've got the great job, you've got the upper middle class house, you've got the college degrees, you've got the good income, it still can catch you. It's always chasing your tail. So you always got to stay alert. Um, but went through that kind of second era of trauma, overcame that, came on the other side. I'm like, you know what? All I do is work. I'm tired of it. I feel like I'm in a position now where I don't have that fear of poverty because that's driven a lot of it. I don't ever want to be poor again. I don't ever want to struggle. I don't ever want to find roaches in my kitchen. I don't ever want to have food insecurity ever again. Not going to do it. But I'm like, I think I'm in a good enough place where I can balance work and life a little better. So I made the choice to be just college professor, to do some other things to bring in revenue, but that is not a full time job. And then travel. And then I started posting travel content. It started going viral. As a business professor and a business brain, I saw opportunity. My hustle mindset kicked in, and I said, okay, I can actually make a career out of this. I can monetize this while still helping people, because that is the root of who I am. I always want to help and uplift other people. That's why I started making content in the first place, was to share as an educator things that I learned. I want to share it with the world. I get so excited about it. And so that is when this next phase of my life was born.
Now, when you do these things, how much of you're an educator first? I used to teach school in Cincinnati. I know the importance of education. I also know the importance of whatever we do, we kind of bring a little bit of ourself or vulnerability into the career. How much of that vulnerability are you bringing into this new journey of going to different places and showing people the, the beauty of travel? But how much of your pain is also being resonated back into the people? Because you're just not getting on boats going places. You're afraid of being in a poverty situation again. You're afraid of the traumas catching up, because they do catch up with you. Even if it's not through you, it's somebody else. It's somebody else's stuff. So what's the message when you're doing this? Like, what's the big end game outside of monetizing and enjoying all the beautiful places that this world has to offer? Let me break it down simple. What's the end game for you?
The game for me is to educate, help, and uplift. And I think that is what resonates with my audience. And I think my experiences as a child have led me to be open, authentic, and vulnerable. I talk about these things. I don't hide these things. I don't say these things with shame. I had a video that went viral on all platforms of Carnival is so ghetto. So I don't know if you know Carnival Cruise Line, right? But Carnival Cruise Line is one of the most popular cruise lines, my favorite cruise line. And it is a very diverse cruise line. And I'm so tired of hearing people say Carnival is ghetto. And I made a whole video saying, do you realize what you're really saying when you say that? Do you realize too, the people that grew up in the ghetto or grew up impoverished? Do you realize kind of the microaggressions that you have here against large swaths of people, and really how problematic that is? And so I think that vulnerability, my willingness to talk about how I grew up, my willingness to share my life, not just the good stuff, because there's a lot of influencers out there that sell this lifestyle of 5-star travel and the gloss and the beauty and the perfect aesthetics. I'm not afraid to be raw and authentic and to talk about the ugly stuff and to talk about the uncomfortable things. And I think that really resonates with people. And first and foremost, I try to never lie. I always try to be authentic of if I go to a resort and it's terrible, I'm going to tell you it's terrible. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I don't do collaborations with cruise lines because I don't want to be bought and paid for. I travel on my own dime. I do these things in a way where I can share the truth with people. And I think they really respect that, especially in an era where there is so much authenticity in the online space, especially in social media.
Let's talk about that real quick before we wrap up. I did hear about the cruise line. I did hear and seen the videos of, I don't even know what I would call it. I see people dancing and, having fun. I mean, but let me say it like this. If there wasn't an issue, then why would the cruise line change its policies? If what people consider, I'm not going to use the word ghetto. Let me use another word here. Appropriate behavior. What is appropriate behavior on a cruise ship? Is what it boils down to. I'm not going to use ghetto. What is appropriate behavior on a family set cruise line? And if it wasn't appropriate behavior, situations or new guidelines would not have been put in place. So what's your take on that? You've heard in and out. To me, I'm like, if something had to happen that was inappropriate to make them go back and change the policies, to make it an entertainment for everybody. What's your take on that?
Oh, I have lots of takes on it. I don't know if we have enough time to cover it, but I do have a couple of long form videos, including my cruise pod episode that I put out last week about the real truth of Carnival, the good, and also why it's not for everybody. I do think Carnival, and again, I don't sugarcoat anything, and I love Carnival, and people always accuse me of being paid for by Carnival, but I'm also Carnival's number one critic. And Carnival does have some issues they need to address, but I think they're going about it in the wrong way. I think banning clack fans. So this is a new one they have, right? So boots on the ground, popular line dance, right? And you have the fan that you clack. Well, they banned the fans, right? They're citing that as a safety hazard, at least in the inside dance clubs. I do know
Mhm.
that there are some accusations that they're doing some cultural targeting right now, and it does kind of seem that way, especially with them supposedly. I haven't. I'm taking my next Carnival cruise in about 2 weeks, so I'll tell you for sure that they're scaling back on the hip hop music, and that will disappoint me because that's actually the number one reason I love Carnival. I grew up in an urban environment. I grew up loving hip hop. It's my favorite genre. I love doing the wobble. I love boots on the ground. I love this stuff, and so I personally will be sad if they've made these changes. But there is an appropriate expectation of behavior, and that's not particular to any demographic group. That is about, I think, Carnival having a need to police the behavior in a better way than they have. I have seen many altercations on cruise ships, not always Carnival, but more commonly on Carnival. I have seen some bad behavior. It's not particularly any one group, which I think sometimes does create a misconception that it is a certain cultural issue. I don't think it is. I think it's Carnival not preventing over serving. I do think there's a culture of alcohol, which again, is a little bit of a traumatic past for me, but I do see a lot of over serving of alcohol, and I wish Carnival would tamp back on that a little bit. You can still be the fun ships, but you don't need alcohol to do that in terms of overconsumption. And there are policies about bad behavior. I've seen them hand wave bad behavior and not really tamp down on it. And that has led, I think, to this problem where there are more physical altercations in Carnival cruise ships. And the other thing, I just got off of an MSC cruise. Carnival security, they're very small people. And on a cruise ship, you can't be carrying, pepper spray and weapons, right? So you have these guns. That's all you got. And so Carnival, I think, has a tendency to hire security that are not exactly intimidating. My MSC cruise, for example, the security, both men and women, were more imposing. And so I think that might be a little bit of a problem too. And Carnival's a little too slow to respond when things pop off on a cruise ship. You can't let things escalate to a full-on brawl involving multiple people. You've got to be more vigilant. So I think there are some issues Carnival absolutely needs to address. I've made several videos impeaching them, imploring them, please do, implement these things. But banning fans, scaling back on hip hop, I don't think that's the answer.
You seem to be not a spokesman for Carnival. So since everybody calls you the Carnival lady, has Carnival reached out to you about your comments and even said anything about things that you've posted about activities and so forth, your concerns? Have they reached out to you?
Fun fact, Carnival has to this day not once ever reached out to me, not once. Good, bad, or ugly, or otherwise, never. And that's okay, right? I like to be unbiased. And when I cruise Carnival, I do not want special treatment. I don't want that on any cruise line. I never tell a cruise line, I don't call their PR people, hey, I'm traveling on your cruise because I don't want to be treated differently. When I'm giving my honest feedback, I need it to be what everyone's going to experience. I don't want them to roll out some red carpet for me or make sure I get the queen's treatment if that's not what the authentic experience is. So I'm kind of glad they haven't reached out to me. That's why I do not collaborate with cruise lines. I'm not going to be bought and paid for. Now, I did have an incident on a Carnival ship back in March. I made a video because they had a mold issue. They had some mold on the ceiling, very visible black mold. It went viral on every platform. Obviously, it made its way to Carnival. I started getting some special attention of, people coming up from Carnival on the ship and, oh, we're addressing the problem. I assure you, we're going to give you a behind the scenes tour and like sending gifts to my stateroom. Like, you don't need to do that. When you do well and you do great things, I'm going to shout that from the rooftops. But when you do stuff that needs calling out, like letting mold grow on your ceiling, which endangers the health of cruisers, and also I'm not a mold expert, I don't know for sure, but it looks like black mold, right? And either way, you shouldn't have it growing there. Fix it. I'm going to call that out too. And for better or for worse, I know it probably hurts me financially. I could probably be doing lucrative 5-figure collaborations with cruise lines, but that's not why I started doing this. I started doing this to share information, to educate people, to get them excited about travel and cruising. And Carnival may be a great fit for somebody, but it might not be for somebody else. And I'm never going to lie. I'm never going to go blow smoke up your rear end. You're always going to get the truth with me.
Before we wrap up, what are mm, you've been in so many places. Give me three of your top places that you went on a cruise line that was truly enjoyable for you.
Oh man, people ask me this all the time, and it's so hard to answer. Because here's the thing, every port has beauty, and there are some ports that cruisers tend to hate. One of my favorites is Nassau, Bahamas. They think,
Mhm.
oh, the vendors are pushy. I see people trying to make a living. They see, over commercialization. I see people trying to feed their kids. They see people, playing music on the beach. I see people having fun, right? So I think it's about your shift in mindset. I love Nassau. It's one of my favorite places. If I ever were to build an empire enough to where I could have a second home, Nassau is probably my number one pick. I love Nassau. I love the culture. I love the people. I love the hustle. And people just trying to make a better life for themselves. So I would say Nassau because people hate it and I don't understand it. I don't get it. Um, I recently did a European cruise, so outside of the Caribbean, I would say Sicily, specifically Taormina, Italy. And part of
Okay.
this, I think sometimes your travel experience aren't even so much about the destination, but rather the people you're traveling with and the experience that you have there. But it was with my boyfriend, and we chartered a boat. He ended up being a 12-year-old. I'm not kidding, literally like a 12-year-old driver. I guess that's how they roll in Sicily. And we're like, okay, we're going to go with it. His dad owns the company, whatever, drive us around. He ended up being a great captain, the best 12-year-old captain I've ever had. And he took us inside all these grottos, and the weather was perfect, right? And that plays a factor too. And it was just the most romantic, gorgeous, stunning day where you're just sitting back and you get chills and you say to yourself, oh my God, for all the ills of this earth and all the wrong of humanity, there is so much beauty here. And I am so thankful to be a part of this earth. I'm so thankful to be alive. It's just when you have those moments, right? And then third favorite, I would probably say is St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, which sounds basic because you're like, well, it's in the U.S., but I have
Yeah.
my problems with the United States, but we are a beautiful place too. And so many beautiful things and beautiful people. And again, the culture, the beaches are unparalleled. My first experience actually swimming, snorkeling with a turtle, a sea turtle, was in St. Thomas. And I've seen sea turtles every time I've gone. And for me, again, that's just one of those moments you're swimming and there's a turtle in nature and you're just in awe that this is life and you're just so thankful, especially when you've been through some stuff. You're like, here I
Yeah.
am in this beautiful place on earth at this beautiful beach swimming with a freaking sea turtle. And I grew up the kid whose dad beat the crap out of her and burned her house down. How did we get here? I don't know, but I'm thankful that we're here.
How can the viewers follow you on your social media and enjoy your journey? I think you've done some outstanding beast mindsets here, overcoming trauma, telling yourself that you're not going to be a victim, that you're going to make sure that your life is everything you want it to be. I follow your social media page. I enjoy watching all the places that you pull into and your content in general. But how can the viewers reach out to you to follow you on your social media pages?
Probably the best place is my website, profmelissa.com, PROF Melissa.com, because right there at the top, I have links to all my social channels because I am on many of them, but not all of them. And that's just the easiest way. And I also designed my website to really be a helpful, free educational resource. So every place I've ever traveled in the world, I come back home. I do love to write. I love to teach. It's what I do, right? And so I love to just share with people the hidden gems, what you should know, what you should expect, what's good, what's bad, and to just put that information out there at no cost to people. And I do that with my video content on social media too, but my port guides on my website, that's the most comprehensive information. And I love when I meet people and they say, you were so helpful. I never took a cruise before and I was intimidated. I didn't know what to expect and you made it so easy. That to me is fulfillment.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Melissa, for taking time out to come and share such a beautiful story. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been once again another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton show.